Hi, this is Shannon Perry of Audiotocracy Podcast Production. As I record this, it's August 2022. In April of this year, I lost my partner of 17 years. He died without any written record of his wishes, but I knew from conversations we'd had that he wanted to be composted, or as my guest puts it, transformed. Fortunately, we live in Washington State, the first state in the nation to legalize human composting, or re-legalize it as the case may be. There are many good reasons to choose composting. No casket, no chemicals, no land taken up for a grave. Instead, he knew his last act would be to give back to the earth. It was a terrible time, but knowing we could give this gentle man a gentle exit provided some real comfort. I hope you'll listen, and if you're in a state where soil transformation is not yet an option, check our show notes for resources to help pass necessary legislation in your state. Hello, and thank you for joining me today. My guest is Carolyn Mazes of Earth Funeral, and today we're going to be talking about the fairly new, or new again, I guess, idea of human composting as a way of gently returning a loved one's remains to the earth. So, Carolyn, could you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I am currently a co-founder and chief operating officer of Earth Funeral. My background is in strategy consulting for many years, and then I worked in healthcare for a long time. Through my work in healthcare, was working largely with terminally ill people and became very interested in end-of-life care as a result of that. I became trained as an end-of-life doula after volunteering with my local hospice and the Conversation Project, doing a lot of advanced care plannings. And so that's kind of how I ended up being exposed to this space and deciding that I really wanted to come and help build a company to offer natural organic reduction or soil transformation more broadly.
And what got you started on the path of the natural reduction, as you say?
Yeah, so I actually first heard about it through an end-of-life doula Facebook group. And when I heard the idea initially, I was just so struck by it because it seemed very obvious to me, as in, why have we not been doing this for a very long time? But then it also just really resonated with me. Personally, I would say, an environmentalist. I became a vegetarian at 13. I grew up in the Midwest, so that was very abnormal, but have been kind of very involved with environmental issues since a pretty young age. I also, from kind of a spiritual perspective, just find that I connect with nature, and that's something that's really important to me and who I am as a person. I spend a lot of time outside. And so when I first heard about this, it's what I wanted. And I instantly felt compelled to see how I might be able to help make it available to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I think when I first looked into it, it was more of I want a way to not do a traditional funeral with the coffin and the embalming fluid and all the things that seem really negative. And then the more I sort of explored Earth Funeral, the more I realized this is not a negative. This is a total positive. Like, it's all about embracing nature. It's not about rejecting the traditional. It's just more about a positive and gentle exit at the end of life.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's I had always thought, oh, I'll just be cremated because it's the least resource intensive option out there. And then I heard about this, and what I think is amazing about this as an option is that not only does it provide this kind of sense of ecological connection, but it's also, like you said, it's a positive. We actually get to help regenerate the environment. So instead of having our last act be one of pollution, we get to have it be one of giving back to the earth and to future generations. And to me, that's just incredibly meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's doing something positive rather than negating a negative.
Right.
Or it's both, I guess is what it really is. So can you take me a little bit through the science of human composting?
Yeah, for sure. So what we're essentially doing is we're replicating the process that happens naturally underground, except that we're putting it inside of a contained vessel so that we can optimize the conditions for that composting to happen. And so at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're balancing the carbon nitrogen ratios, and we're getting that perfect level of moisture and aeration to ensure that the process is thorough and efficient and consistent.
That's great. And so what is the product at the end?
Yep. So it's this nutrient-rich soil. It's up to about a cubic yard, although sometimes it can be much less than that. It really does depend on the size of the decedent, and it's really it smells good. It looks good. It is not in any way, shape, or form human by the end.
Right.
And so I think that's a really important thing for people to realize is that it really is just nutrient rich soil or compost. And it can be used in restoration projects, which we have a really beautiful piece of land on the Olympic Peninsula. We're working with an ecologist to restore that land. It had been historically logged, and it now has quite a few non-native kind of invasive species. So we're creating a really beautiful sanctuary there and protecting it for future generations. And then that soil can also be returned to families. And many people will scatter it, plant a garden, plant a tree. Some might keep it for longer term, although we do recommend that we actually return it back to the environment because it is a living organism.
Mm-hmm. That's so great. And why is this a better option than the more traditional? Well, I say traditional, but really this is sort of the returning to the traditional in a way, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
fair.
the what we think of as traditional, like burial, cremation, things like that, why is this a more sustainable or more natural option?
So there's a lot of environmental benefits, I would say, of choosing this as an option. And cremation emits a lot of harmful substances, including CO2. So it's over
Mhm.
530 pounds of CO2 per process. But
Wow.
then there's also a lot of other chemicals and substances that are emitted, including things like mercury. On the other hand, natural organic reduction or soil transformation is actually carbon neutral. I think it's actually probably carbon negative, but we don't have enough research to really be able to put the numbers behind that right now.
Mhm,
Just
mhm.
because when we use that soil in the environment to regenerate it and grow additional plants and trees, it helps to sequester carbon, which
Right.
is a pretty amazing thing. When we think about traditional burial, we bury over 800,000 gallons of formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen, every single year. We bury over 100,000 tons of steel, over 1.6 million tons of reinforced concrete, and over 30 million board feet of hardwood every single year. And just kind of as a point of comparison, that's enough wood to build 2 to 3,000 homes. That's enough steel to construct a Golden Gate Bridge every single year. And we're just putting it underground. And so from
Wow.
a resource perspective, traditional burial is really significant. And then you think this land is going to be maintained in perpetuity. So not only are we taking up valuable land, but then we're using fertilizers and water and all of these other things to then maintain it looking a certain way in perpetuity. I was just reading something about how in California, so many of the cemeteries are just going absolutely brown because they cannot use water, which is a precious, precious resource, to be watering cemeteries.
Mhm. Wow. Okay, I had no idea that it required the equivalent of a Golden Gate Bridge and
Isn't that
2 to 3
amazing?
That's a lot of material.
It's a huge
Wow.
amount of material that we just put underground
Every year.
every year.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, I'm feeling even better about my decision right now.
Right, right.
So, can you take me through the entire process of when a person is received to your facility until Olympic Peninsula?
Yep. Yeah, happy to. So when someone is brought into our care, we start what we call a chain of custody. So it's actually a highly regulated industry, and we're regulated just like any other funeral home or disposition provider in the state of Washington. And so we begin that chain of custody. The individual is brought into our care. We hold them in our care in a refrigerated facility until we have all of the paperwork. So there's also, because it is a highly regulated industry, sometimes it takes a while to get all of the paperwork in order. Once that paperwork is all in order, we can then begin the reduction process. We begin by preparing the body. So it's very minimal. We'll gently wash the body with just water. We actually want to retain all of that good bacteria, all those microbes. It helps with the entire process. And then we shroud the body in a biodegradable shroud. It's actually really beautiful. We place some flowers, wildflowers on top, and then we will place the body into our vessel. We'll have pre-filled the vessel with what we call amendment, and that's things like wood chip and mulch largely. And so there's a bed of this kind of beautiful natural materials. We then place the body inside the vessel, close that vessel, and then it's placed into our kind of main facility racking system where it'll stay for about 30 30-ish, maybe 30 plus days.
Mhm.
At that point in time, we are hooked into a really sophisticated process control system so that we're monitoring the moisture level, the aeration, all of those things to make sure that we're having a really efficient and good composting process. Throughout the process, we will take soil samples kind of toward the end of the process to see where it is in terms of maturity and stability of the soil. We'll then remove the soil for what we call processing. And at that point, we would remove any kind of inorganic materials. So think about kind of hip and knee replacements, which there are so many of us who have so many of these now. So
Right.
that's pretty common. We'll recycle those things that we can. And then we also further reduce the bones, because if we didn't, that could take many, many, many years for those to kind of
Right.
decompose on their own.
Right.
We reintroduce the bones, the organic material, into the soil where it will finish that composting process. We also then remove samples of the soil to send out for third-party testing to make sure that it's safe to return to the environment. And so throughout that composting process, it will get over 131 degrees Fahrenheit for over 72 hours. And that actually kills pathogens. And so we monitor that, make sure that that actually happens. But we also do send it out for third-party testing just to ensure that we have hit those thresholds and that we aren't putting out soil that has pathogens in it. And so then at that point, we would be able to release the soil back to the families. And so we would reach out and say, your loved one's soil is ready to be picked up. They can either pick it up at our facility, we can mail it to them by USPS tracked mail, or we can even do hand delivery. And so it kind of depends on what people want. Some people want, we offer up to 5 containers for free. Some people actually want all of the soil, in which case it's a little bit more logistically challenging just because they have to make sure that they are able to handle that much soil. So we're able to, put it on a pickup truck and a pallet, but then they have to be able to unload it and whatnot. So we have had a few people choose to do that, which is great. And then the remainder of the soil is donated to our land on the Olympic Peninsula. And so then at that point, once we have kind of a certain amount, we'll arrange for transportation. We really do want to minimize the transport and make it as efficient as possible, just because we are trying to make this as green as possible.
Right.
And then it'll be brought out to our conservation land, and then it's spread and used in our restoration project there.
So what you end up with, this is not something that has to be regulated. I don't have to get permission to put it in my yard. It's not anything that's dangerous to anyone. It's just soil.
It is soil, right?
It is
Exactly. Soil. We actually follow the same regulations as you would for cremated remains, which are also an inert material, right? It's not going to cause any harm to the environment, but we do want to be sensitive to what it is and what it means to people.
Right.
And so we very much want to keep that in mind, because it is special, it is sacred, and we don't want to lose sight of that. And so there are some of the same rules. So for example, if you were to scatter on private land, you would need to have consent from the landowner. If you were to scatter in a public park or a national park or something along those lines, you would want to get the authorization of whoever is in charge of that land.
Got it. Okay. That's great to know. Thank you. From what you hear from your clients, why do people make this decision for themselves or for a loved one?
Yeah, I think there are the two driving forces that I see and which resonate with me personally are the environmental side of it. So I just don't want to be causing harm in my last act.
Right.
And so there's that environmental piece. But then I think there's also what I would call the ecological connection and spiritual side of it, which is I want to return to nature. I want to do something that's giving back. I really want to return to the earth. So we have a lot of people who are nature lovers, right? I've heard from so many families that I've talked to, especially people who've lost someone unexpectedly, for whom this is a source of solace. Even in a terrible, terrible situation, at least there's this one thing where we can feel positive and good about it, that we're able to do something constructive in a bad situation.
Yeah, it just feels like a very healthy decision for so many reasons. Not just healthy for the environment, but healthy for the individuals involved, I think. So,
right.
So I understand that you make sustainable decisions all along through the process. What are some of the things that we may not know about that are also that you're doing to sort of continue to be sustainable throughout the whole process? Things like, you don't go out to the Olympic Peninsula until you have enough to sort of merit the journey.
Yeah,
Things like
I would say we try to think about that in every single decision right, that we make. So everything from where we sourced our branded materials. So I spent a ton of time doing research and talking to vendors, and it's actually not that easy to find
Mm-hmm.
eco-friendly products
Hmm.
and to find them available at scale. And
Right.
so, just sourcing all of the kind of eco-friendly products is a big piece of it. We offset all of the electricity that we use within the facility with renewable sources, which is wonderful that we're able to do, and that in the state of
That's
Washington,
great.
actually make it pretty easy for us to be able to do that. And then there's also around the transportation. So we service Oregon as well, and we will frequently have new cases in Oregon, and we try to wait until not multiple days, but we usually can coordinate it so that we are transporting 2 or 3 or 4 decedents up at one time. So again, so that we're minimizing those individual driving trips.
That's terrific. How many states and what states allow for human composting at this point?
Well, Washington was the first, and then Colorado and Oregon within the past couple of years. Oregon, just as of the beginning of July, they have NOR facility licenses available. They finished all their rulemaking. And then Vermont, I helped with some policy work in Vermont this year, and that
Awesome.
was signed into law. Yep, I think it was in May. And then we also are working in California. And so that legislation is still under consideration. We have until the end of August to get that passed and sent to the governor's desk. And it's looking
Go
actually really,
California.
really good. Yes,
Awesome.
exactly. So we're really excited about that one. It's also still under consideration in New York. It was actually signed, it was approved by the Senate and the House, and it's awaiting signature for the governor.
Wonderful.
And then it's also still under consideration in Massachusetts, so it could pass this year. But then we're working on legislation in Delaware, Illinois, and Minnesota as well. So we'll be reintroducing legislation there in the next legislative session.
That's great. Can you explain to me what for those places where the acceptance is a little slower, what are the main objections that people have?
For the most part, so in the states where it has been proposed but hasn't gotten approved, it's usually just that there isn't enough energy and a driving force behind getting it done. And so it's been entirely grassroots driven. And so a legislator will hear about it, or one of their constituents will hear about it and reach out to them and say, this is amazing. I want this as a choice in my state. And so it gets proposed, but then generally, unless there are other people involved who are going to help get it on the agendas for discussion, who are going to support with kind of answering all of the questions and providing the resources that are needed, it tends to just kind of sit on the docket and not make
Mm-hmm.
much progress.
Right.
And we have at Earth have pretty limited resources, and so we kind of have to pick and choose where we can support in any given year. And we've been really thrilled to see the success in Vermont this year, because it was our kind of first foray into trying to support this kind of legislation. So that was really, really exciting to see. And like I said, we'll be putting some resources behind supporting efforts in some of those other states in the next legislative session. Typically, you had asked about the kind of pushback that we might get.
Mm-hmm.
Thus far, the only group that has really come out against it is the Catholics, basically, not the individuals, but the church
Right.
itself.
Got
I
it.
mean, having been raised as a Catholic, I see personally no issue with this
Gotcha.
whatsoever. I think it's a natural process, but there is some pushback in that regard. I think the other place where we've seen some hesitation is from kind of more traditional funeral directors and
Mm-hmm.
cemetery associations. And I think in that regard, there might be kind of some resistance to change or
Mm-hmm.
fear of not being able to be a part of this movement,
Right.
which
Right.
we've tried to be really proactive in communicating that we're eager to work with funeral directors and other funeral
Right.
homes and even cemeteries, right? Like I could see a world where you have a family plot in a cemetery and your entire family has been buried there for multiple generations. That doesn't mean that you can't choose a soil transformation and then bring your soil to the cemetery to be
Exactly.
interred there or scattered there or whatever it might be, right? I think we can come up with some really wonderful kind of collaborations where everyone wins.
I could totally see that. Like it makes absolute sense, particularly in places where, land use is a question,
Right.
water use is a question. Like this makes so much sense. People are still going to want ceremonies. They're still going to want
Exactly.
to gather and talk, and they're still going to want a place that they can go to talk to that person or, feel close to that person. So
Absolutely. I
it,
absolutely
the
agree.
objections seem to be like things that can be overcome. And
I hope
obviously with
so.
with
Yeah.
so many states, at least paying attention to it, obviously that's becoming part of the public awareness. So if someone is listening to this podcast and saying, okay, you didn't name my state in that list, who can I go to? Do they go to a legislator and just say, hey, let's talk about this and start the process? Is that the best way?
Yeah, that is the most powerful way for this change to happen, is when it comes directly from a constituent saying, I want this, here's why.
Nice.
We're always happy to support those efforts. So we're actually working with a few people who proactively reached out to us, residents of the state of Delaware, who reached out to us and said, I want to help support this effort. And so we talk to them and say, what can we do to help you? We can give you kind of some documents with FAQs so you can go and talk to people within your community to get signatures, right? We can help you draft a letter to your representative that you can then go and gather signatures. We are very, very happy to help support people in those efforts, because I do think it is far more impactful when it comes from the constituents.
Right. That's great. So, and we'll talk a little bit about resources, and we'll certainly include some of that in the show notes so that people have the opportunity to get hold of some of those and get their process started in their state.
Right.
Are there people that feel that it's disrespectful? And how do you explain this whole process or the product to people who are confused or curious or even a little bit grossed out?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's a really natural process. It's what would happen in nature without our intervention.
Right.
And we really are just trying to make it more efficient. And we're trying to optimize it. And the reason for doing that is so that we can make it more widely available, and so that we aren't using up land in perpetuity.
Right.
And so that we can actually use that product in a positive, regenerative way. So I think that it's both natural and then it's regenerative is what makes it so special.
And then, the idea that you can put it in your garden and grow flowers, like
Right.
that's such a lovely way to think about someone.
Yes.
Continuing to exist in some way.
I talked to a gentleman recently, and he is planning for his wife, who's very sadly ill. And she's from England, and I think it was English oaks. And so he's going to go and plant English oak trees with her soil, and it's just that kind of connection that will last then, for hopefully the rest of his life with this meaningful place. It's just, I think, such a special thing.
It's a perfect tribute. Just perfect.
Yeah.
It really is. So were there any legal complications to getting this option introduced in Washington state? And what did you have to do to sort of overcome those?
Yeah, you know what? I think that I wasn't personally involved in getting the legislation passed here. There were some really amazing trailblazers who undertook that battle. And I think the first state is always the hardest, right? Because it's completely new. No one knew what it was. And so there's always a bit of a fear and a lot of questions and uncertainty around safety and all of these proof points that they had to really show that this is safe and that it can be regulated in a way so that it is respectful and all of those other things. So there's the newness of it that was the huge barrier. But then also, I think secondarily, or maybe not even secondarily, it could even be primarily, is that people don't like talking about death.
Right.
And so I think those two hurdles were really very significant to getting it passed in the state of Washington. I think fortunately, Washington tends to have more kind of progressive, open-minded legislators, probably. So there's a little bit more willingness to consider it as an option.
It certainly seemed like Jay Inslee was our governor of Washington state was very open to this and very even encouraging about it. So that sure
makes
that
a
helped.
big difference. Having the kind of the leadership be invested in it.
Absolutely. So I'm curious about what new language you've had to create around your business, because it is very different from I'm coming up against the word traditional funeral services, but have you had to create things like, do you call it human composting, or is there a way that doesn't make us think of like table scraps?
Yeah.
Which is a terrible thing. Sorry.
We had a lot of these conversations as a founding team.
Sure.
And we had a lot of debates. We went back and forth a lot on this. We certainly have hesitation around changing the language or creating too many names for it. What we saw with alkaline hydrolysis is that they kind of they sort of developed a problem with what they call it. So is it water cremation? Is it alkaline hydrolysis? They just have a bunch of different names. And And so we didn't want to create that same scenario here.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, a lot of people are turned off by the phrase human composting.
Mm-hmm.
And so that didn't feel like the best option for us.
Mm-hmm.
When we say natural organic reduction, that is a mouthful and it's not super descriptive unless you've
Mm-hmm.
been around it for a long time and then it kind of makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to you. It's kind of it's a mouthful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we actually landed on soil transformation
Right.
as how we would describe this process, because we are transforming someone into soil. And so we think it's descriptive, but then it's also not off-putting to
Mm-hmm.
people who have potentially a weird or negative connotation to composting. A
Right.
lot of people have a very positive association with that. And that's great. And that's fine. And so we do
Right.
use that language in some places on our website and whatnot, so that people can actually find us and have
Right.
kind of a good sense of what it is.
Right.
But we don't lead with that terminology.
Right. And boy, transformation is such a lovely word. Like that's, what a butterfly is. And
Right.
that's definitely got very positive connotation to it.
Right. And it's a part of the life cycle, right?
Right.
That is the life cycle. We transform into each kind of piece of that.
That's
So
perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, that's well done, y'all. As a word person, you landed on a great term. I'm again, I can see why you would keep the word compost in your website, because if somebody's searching, transformation is not going to be the first thing that comes to mind. But
right.
yeah, that works
Right.
great. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the other end of life services that you offer? And I'm thinking, I have now the little card that I carry in my wallet that says, "I'm all taken care of. Talk to these folks."
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly, we want to make things as easy as possible for our customers, our clients, no matter kind of where they are in their life. And
Mhm.
so if we offer at need services. So this is if someone has passed away and they need services immediately, we are there. For people who have potentially an imminent need, so this is kind of 6 months or so.
Mhm.
So a lot of people who are going on to hospice,
Right.
we actually get a lot of people who are planning for themselves, which is very unusual in this industry. But I think it goes to show that this is something that just really resonates personally with people. They
Mhm.
want to plan it for themselves.
Mhm.
So we have that. We call it an imminent need
Mhm.
sort of offering. And then, like you were mentioning, pre-arrangements. And so this is for people who want to take care of their end of life or death care in advance. And
Mhm.
this could be as a part of setting up a will or an estate, doing an advanced care plan. All of that, it fits in really nicely with that. And it really does give people peace of mind, knowing
Mhm.
that their wishes, their values will be kind of followed in their end of life care. But then it also takes a burden off of friends and family,
Mhm.
which I think is a really important thing, so that we're giving kind of peace of mind both to the individual as well as then to the families. We also actually offer membership. So we've had a lot of younger people reach out and say, you know what, I really love this idea and I want this, but I'm 35 and I don't want to be
Right.
doing my, I don't, or I can't afford, right, to
Mhm.
spend almost $5,000 on a pre-arrangement at this point in time. And so
Right.
we do offer a membership, which is only $35. And it includes a card that's similar to that pre-arrangement card, some paperwork that it's not a legal document, but it allows people to write out, here are my end of life wishes. And I
Perfect.
want to have a soil transformation. And then
Mhm.
we also send a pair of really cute eco-friendly Earth branded socks. And
Nice.
so it helps people to be kind of a part of the movement in a way. And then we also do discounts as well for people who are in other states where we are not yet currently offering services as a part of that
Wonderful.
membership. And so it's just a nice way to be involved in the movement, to support us, to be able to say, hey, I'm interested in your services, because we're keeping a list, right, of all the people who are indicating interest. And that'll help us prioritize where we expand to next.
That's great. That's great. Because burial is sort of the default, at least for now, with the formaldehyde and the coffin and all that. Because that is the default, it was really felt good to me to be able to just go ahead and take care of it and know, I put that document in my lockbox that says this is and it's already been set up, it's already been paid for. You'll transport me where I need to be. It's just it's a gift to the people that you leave behind. To this is all taken care of. This is one thing you don't have to be involved with. And that my wishes have been fully satisfied and
Right,
respected. That's huge, I think.
right,
It
right.
really is. Have you heard what people do with the soil that you provide? Do you get feedback? Do you get pictures of
We
flowers
haven't
or things?
gotten any pictures yet, but we have gotten a lot of feedback. A lot of people will scatter it on a favorite hiking trail. A lot of people will bring it to, we had a family that brought it to their cabin in Idaho and planted a
Nice.
tree with it there. We had a family in Oregon who lost their young son, and
Hmm.
they brought one of the containers of soil to his school, and then his classmates planted a memorial garden, which
Oh,
was
lovely.
what an
Oh.
amazing way to honor and commemorate and memorialize this person, but then also for these children to have this experience and connection with death
Hmm.
that can then be positive in a way. I
Hmm.
think is a really, what a powerful moment for them.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the best parts of all of this is that it's such a positive outlook on death. And when your entire concept of death in modern society is television programs and movies, and where it's violent and it's gross and it's,
Right,
it's always all bad and there's nothing redemptive about it, to have this process that's like, no, you're actually gonna, this person's going to be part of a tree, or they're going to
right,
be helping grow flowers. Like, that's, I think, a really wonderful, especially having kids learn that at a young age, that this is part of the process.
right, exactly. And to be able to nourish that life
Hmm.
is really amazing. We've
Right.
had a lot of people say that they're planting trees, planting a favorite flower bush, etc.
I love that. That's wonderful. What is one thing you wish everyone knew about soil transformation?
Think it's is that it is safe and natural and gentle, and it truly can allow us to have our last act be a gift to the earth and to future generations.
Perfect. That's absolutely perfect and beautiful, and I love it. Thank you. Where can people go for more information in addition to the Earth Funeral website?
People can call us at any point in time, where we have a really wonderful team of people who are always happy to answer questions, no matter if you think it's a weird question or not. We are happy to answer it, and I'm sure it won't be the first time we've heard it. And our number is 877 327 4109 if you ever want to give us a call.
Awesome.
You can come in for a tour. You can book a tour through our website, or again, just give us a call. We always welcome people coming in. We're excited to welcome people into our facility. And then we're also building out our social media presence. It has not been our priority or focus.
Right.
And so there's not a whole lot there right now, but we will be building that out over the next year. So hopefully a
That's
lot more
great.
resources there.
Can people visit the land on the Olympic Peninsula? Is that open to the public?
It is not open yet. We're hoping by the end of 2023. We've actually made a ton of progress, even just over this past summer, in terms of setting up the infrastructure to make sure that it's safe for people to visit. We have kind of some steep slopes and things like that. And we had to
Right.
put in a parking area and a gate and all of those kinds of
Right.
things. And so we think we'll be end of 2023 is definitely doable. It might be sooner than that. And our current plan, well, we want to keep it as natural as possible. And
Mhm.
we want it to really have a peaceful kind of sanctuary feel to it. So what we're currently thinking, and we certainly welcome feedback. We've changed a lot of decisions based on customer feedback already. So
Mhm.
I just always want to say we welcome feedback on this, but we're currently thinking about having kind of a sign up system so that one family at a time would essentially be able to sign up for a given day, so that they
Mhm.
would really have that kind of peace and quiet and sanctuary feel. They could go have a picnic, go for a walk, sit and meditate, whatever it might be, and just have time to really be on the land and feel a part of
Lovely.
it.
Mhm. How many transformations have you done?
Yeah. So we have actually been at our current capacity since the beginning of the summer.
Wow.
We've wrapped up over 30 now, I believe, which, since we only launched in kind of March, April, is pretty incredible. We're building out our facility has capacity for over 200 vessels, but we're building them out kind of one section at a time, because we're continually making improvements to the technology.
Mhm.
And so we're rolling out our next batch of vessels in the next couple of months. We'll be able to expand our capacity quite a bit then.
Okay. Actually, that was a question I missed out that I wanted to ask you previously. So you're sort of inventing this technology as you're going along because it doesn't exist.
Right, right. I
Wow.
mean, I think that was one of the biggest questions in starting the business, right? Is there a product market fit? As in, will people actually buy this?
Right.
And then B, kind of how scalable is it? Do we really think that we're going to be able to get legislation passed more broadly than just Washington? And then C, it's asking, do we think we can actually build this technology? Can we get the right experts on board to be able to help us develop, not only from the soil science perspective, but then also from the hardware and technology side of it? And I think we've been really lucky in that we've been able to get some pretty significant investments so that we can continue to invest in improving and developing what I think is the most advanced technology out there for soil transformation.
Nice. Yeah, because 30 plus days is a lot quicker than Mother Nature does it. So
right.
Yeah.
And every time I'm amazed by it.
Right.
Right. It feels like a miracle to me. But it's just optimizing that underlying science, which is pretty neat.
And I'm sure it's such a delicate balance between how quickly you can do it safely and making sure everything handles correctly. But then also, the family is waiting. There are other considerations outside of the science. So
absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you can only speed it up so much. And there are times where we'll have to proactively communicate to family, you know what, this is just going slower than we would have expected. It might take an extra week or an extra 2 weeks because we are, testing that soil to make sure that it's mature, to make sure that it's stable before we conclude a process.
And is there like a dictated test result that has to come back before you're able to release that soil? And who makes that designation?
So we are required to do some of that third-party testing. And so that's around pathogens, bacteria, and then also heavy metals. And so it does have to be below certain thresholds for all of those, but we've not even, come close to registering on those different variables. So it's been pretty encouraging.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting that such a natural process now requires a lot of science and technology to make it happen, but understandably, because it has to be within regulation and within a certain time frame and so forth. So
right. And there are some providers who are doing this in a very low tech way. And that's great too. It's just they can only do 1 or 2 a year. Right. And so it just limits the number of people who can actually access this.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. This has been amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
And I have to say that your staff are incredible. You have a fantastic product, a fantastic industry, a fantastic staff.
Thank you. I will pass that along. I have to say, I love our team. I think we have been really fortunate in that every single person who has come to join our organization is here for a reason, and that we all really believe in it and our hearts are in it. And I hope that continues to kind of come across and come through in every single interaction that we have. Our entire team just really cares.
It's clear. And I have to say on a personal note that in talking to people on your staff, Haley in particular, and yourself and a couple of other people as well, just this amazing balance between being completely compassionate, being completely respectful, being completely kind and gentle to the person on the other end of the phone, but also answering some very difficult questions, because this is such a new thing for people. And there are, these concerns of, is this really what I want? Is this going to happen in a way that I want it to happen? Like it just felt very new. And I knew this is what I wanted. I knew this is what my partner wanted. So in that, I didn't have any concerns. I just wanted to make sure that I understood every piece of the process along the way. And I was fully in the know. I got regular updates of where we were in the process, and everything was just delivered so kindly and so generously. And it's, as difficult as that process is, this was the very best it could possibly be. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. That means so much to me. And it's really, it's an honor to be able to take care of people's loved ones. And it's something that we take seriously. And I have to say, I've been a part of a number of laying in ceremonies, and I have not cried at a single one of them.
I can believe that.
and I think that's a really important piece of what we're doing, is maintaining that connection and that humanity, because that's why we do what we're doing.
Right. Well, having gone through the process for someone else, I then immediately signed myself up. So obviously I had a good experience. So
I'm so glad to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in with us today. If you have any questions, please visit earthfuneral.com. We'll have the phone number again in the show notes, but Carolyn, could you give them the phone number again?
Yeah, it's 877-327-4109.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much to Caroline Mazes and the whole team at Earth Funeral. If you're interested in learning more or want to sign up for their services, be sure to check them out at earthfuneral.com. It truly is a gift to give yourself, your loved ones, and the earth. And I can tell you from personal experience that you won't find a kinder or more expert team. Remember, if you think a podcast might be useful for your business or organization, check us out at audiotocracy.com. AUDIOTOCRACY.com. Take care, and I'll see you next time.